Hello, folks. Thank you for joining me once again on today, Wednesday, the 15th of July. Thank you for allowing me to chat to you again. And I want to speak this evening about Genesis chapter 32. Now, before I go any further, I'm going to have a wee trip down memory lane here, a wee touch of nostalgia or a little ramble before we get into the meat of chapter 32. But I have fond memories of this particular chapter. As many of you know, I went to the Irish Baptist College as a mature student. I was in my 40s. Now, previous to that, I had been a self-employed businessman in Belfast. And I was used to setting my own agenda. I was used very much to making my own decisions and making my own plans. And I went from that to, basically back to a college setting, back to a time when the bell went and I had to go in and sit down in a classroom or behind a desk or in some sort of a lecture hall. So I really was experiencing something of a culture shock. I was going back to school some 25 years after I had left. Having said that, it was a wonderful experience and I wouldn't have missed it for the world. And I'd recommend Bible College to anyone who's feeling that call into ministry. Please don't hesitate to speak to me about it. But college life was wonderful, and one of the things that happened was about the middle of the morning every day there would be a time for corporate devotions. This was when the whole college came together. All the folk in the office, all the lecturers, teachers, the principal, and of course all my peers, the students themselves. We all gathered for our daily devotions. And it was up to the students to take responsibility for that. We all took our turn. The rota meant that you didn't have to do it more than once or twice a month at the very most. And it was a valuable exercise. And this chapter that I'm going to talk about, chapter 32, was the first chapter that I remember well taking as a topic for delivering my turn devotions. I don't quite know the date, but I do know that nobody threw anything at me. Nobody shouted at me or interrupted, and they asked me to do it again. So there must have been some value to it anyway. So if you haven't remembered already what the chapter is about, it's the passage where Jacob wrestles with God, and he wrestles all night with him. Now, to put the chapter in context, Jacob swindled his brother out of his birthright, and because of that he had to make a pretty sharp exit from home, and he's been away from home for about 20 years now. He's never patched it up with his brother, and now he finds that he's returning home. He's going back to Canaan and back to where his brother's going to be. Now, before he arrives, he gets word that Esau is coming towards him with 400 men. Now, this is what Jacob feared. He was quite apprehensive about this. It didn't sound as if it was going to be a welcoming party. And Jacob was well outnumbered by his brother and these men. So he tries to do what he can, and he divides his family, his servants, his followers, the travelling group that he was in, he divides them into two, hoping, I suppose, that if Esau and his men descended on one, well, maybe the other group would escape, or vice versa. So, practically speaking, he does what he can, and then he tries to settle down for the night. I'm sure sleep didn't come easily to him. In fact, it didn't come at all, because we read that a stranger came to him in the evening, and the stranger started to wrestle with Jacob. Now, it must have been quite a strange wrestling match, because at some point Jacob realizes that he's not just wrestling with another person, another man, he's actually wrestling with God. And this goes on for quite some time. We're told that the wrestling match goes on until dawn. And it's then that the Lord decides that enough is enough, and he calls time on the match. And he says in verse 26 of Genesis 32, God says, right, Jacob, let me go. It's dawn. The day is breaking. But Jacob, in return, he replies, I will not let you go unless you bless me. Now, by this stage, the Lord had dislocated Jacob's hip. It had been put out of joint, so Jacob was in a fair bit of pain. The Lord said, enough's enough, but Jacob wouldn't let the Lord go. And he held on to him and said that he wouldn't let him go until he got a blessing. Now, the long and the short of it is that Jacob had been weakened physically, but he had been strengthened spiritually. And his request for a blessing must have found favour with God, because God did bless him. In fact, this was the time when God also changed Jacob's name. The Hebrew name Jacob means literally a trickster or a swindler, which is basically exactly what Jacob had done to his brother, to Esau. He swindled him out of his birthright. But his name was being changed from Jacob to Israel. And, yes, you've guessed it, his children, his descendants, are literally the children of Israel. He is one of the patriarchs. He is one of the fathers of the nation of Israel. The country itself takes its name from Jacob, now Israel. So, the Lord changes Jacob's name, but he also blesses him. And one of the ways in which he blesses him is with peace, because when Esau approaches, there isn't the great confrontation that Jacob was worried about so much. And the brothers actually make peace. And Jacob is blessed in that wonderful way as well. So I want you to think about the lesson we get from all this, friends. There's a few lessons, many lessons, but I just want to leave you with one. Because I want you to think about what Jacob actually went through. Okay? He started the night in fear and trembling. He wrestled all night with the Lord, and he came out the other end with a blessing and with peace. And it's a wonderful example, friends, of how when we persevere in prayer, if we wrestle all night with the Lord in prayer, if we don't let him go until he gives us the blessing, we too can be blessed in the way Jacob was blessed. Now, I want you to put this into context for ourselves, apply it to ourselves. Jacob was in fear and trembling. He was in need. Now, think about this yourself personally. Maybe there's something in your life that you really need. Maybe there's something you really want from the Lord. Maybe there's something that you're crying out to him for. And you're praying, and that's good. And you say you'll persevere in prayer, and that's good. You're going to persevere in prayer until the Lord answers whatever it is you're calling out to him for. Can I just ask you, in closing, friends, how badly do you want that thing from the Lord? Do you want it bad enough to do what Jacob did? Are you willing, for example, to wrestle with God all night in prayer, not letting him go until he answers your need and blesses you? I don't know what's in your mind, what sort of circumstance, what sort of trouble, what sort of thing you need to cry out to the Lord for. But if you're in really dire straits, why not spend a whole night in prayer wrestling with the Lord? How badly do you want him to answer? I leave the thought with you. I commend Genesis 32 to you as well. Read it when you get a minute. It's a wonderful chapter, filled with lessons, not least about persevering in prayer. So, keep praying. You may need to pray all night. Keep washing your hands. Keep looking up. Keep safe. Thank you for listening, and I look forward to speaking to you again soon. Until then, bye for now.